Good morning, everyone. This Shabbat we're going to read from two Torah scrolls, the weekly Torah portion, then a second reading in honor of Rosh Chodesh Adar, which is called Shkalim. It's about the census of the Jewish people, which was taken in the desert. Now, the question is twofold. First of all, why is it that the census was taken by each Jew making a contribution? And the second question is, why was the contribution a half of a shekel and not a whole shekel? Last night we had the honor of having former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, speak at the synagogue. And he talked about his role as Prime Minister and how now he went back into high tech, which was where he came from before he entered into politics. And he talked about all of the brilliant companies and innovations that are being founded in Israel today. But then he said, there's an amazing innovation coming out of Israel. He said, one of the biggest problems we have today is the cell phone, the smartphone, where everyone's addicted to it, especially young children. They're always walking around and working on their phone, looking at their phones, TikTok and social media. And he said, Israel has an invention to solve this problem. He said, it's called Shabbat, the day of Sabbath, where for 25 hours you put away the phone and you just spend time with your family, you eat together, you go to synagogue together, in the afternoon you play board games together, and you speak to one another. And while he was obviously joking, but he was very serious, because he was saying is that this is one of the greatest contributions that the Jewish people have given to the world, that the world can benefit so much today from this 3,000-year-old invention that was given by God to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And this is perhaps the reason why the Torah says when you take a census of the Jewish people, it should be taken by the Jewish people each contributing a half shekel. Because if you count the number of Jews, it's a very small, insignificant number. We're 13 million, 14 million Jews in the world, which is less than 0.25% of the world's population. But there's a second way to count Jews, and that's by asking each Jew to make a contribution. And when you count the contributions, you come up with a very, very impressive number. When you count all the contributions of the Jews to the world over the ages, you realize how impactful and how amazing and really, truly great the Jewish people are. But there's a second reason why we only give a half a shekel. And that is because each Jew has to know that as great as you are, and as much as you can accomplish, you're only half without the other. You're incomplete without your fellow man, without your fellow Jew. And we all have to be unified and be one together. And that was the second message that Naftali Bennett shared with us last night. He said, we've had so many accomplishments in the past 75 years in Israel. But he said, this is only the third time in Jewish history that we've had sovereignty in Israel. The first two times, unfortunately, it was internal strife and division that led to the collapse of the Jewish sovereignty in Israel. He says, we're going through a crisis now in Israel. The most important thing we have to remember is that we have to be biyachad, we have to be one, we have to be united like the two halves of the shekel. We need each other. Religious, secular, right-wing, left-wing, it doesn't matter. We have to stand together, because that's the true challenge that we face today, not from existential threats from terrorism or Iran. That we can handle, he said. It's the internal strife that threatens us more than anything else. There's a reporter in Israel, her name is Sivan Rachav Meir, and she told a story how she went to Kathmandu to report on the largest Seder in the world. It's the Chabad Seder led by Rabbi and Rebbetzin Goldschmidt, with 2,500 people, Israelis mostly, backpackers. And she sat at a Seder with 2,500 people, and she was so inspired to see how the Rabbi and the Rebbetzin run this Seder. The next night, she called Chani Goldschmidt, the Rebbetzin, to do an interview with her, to set it up, to talk about the Seder, what it entails to plan a Seder for 2,500 people, the matzah, the wine, the maror for 2,500 people. She couldn't reach her all night. The next day, when she reached her, she said, I was trying to reach you. Where were you? What happened? She said, well, there was a woman who had to go to the mikveh for the first time, and I taught her about mikveh, and I had to accompany her to the mikveh. And there's no mikveh in Kathmandu. I had to travel with her to Bangkok, so I was busy all night. and the reporter said, wow, this was the story, this was the amazing part, that one night after this Rebbetzin planned, organized, and implemented a Seder for 2,500 people. The next night, she was spending her evening with one single person, one single Jewish woman, to teach her the beauty and the importance of mikveh. That's the lesson. When you take a census, sometimes you look at the big number. Remember, that number is made up of individuals, and we have to be there to love one another and support one another and complete one another and help one another, realizing that each one of us is only half of a whole, incomplete without our fellow man. Have a wonderful day.